This student dormitory on 100th Street in Chicago holds the most disturbing secret. On July 14, 1966, a crime was committed here that would shake the city to its core. 8 student nurses were found murdered inside after neighbors from screaming from the house alerted by a 9th nurse who somehow was still alive. What happened that night was so unthinkable at the time. It brought the entire city of Chicago to a standstill and launched a manhunt to find one of America's first mass murderers.
But at the time that this happened, wasn't this like the first of its kind?
As I said before, this is the crime of the century.
And with a whole city gripped in fear and precious little to go on, the police must turn to their only eyewitness. An eyewitness who, to help bring an end to a madman's reign of terror, have to confront him again. This time, face to face. Chicago, July 1966. Corazon Amurao was one of many living the new American dream during the post-war economic boom of the 50s and 60s. Having left her home in the Philippines, Corazon moved to Chicago only 3 months earlier in May 1966 as part of a nursing exchange program and became a member of staff at the South Chicago Community Hospital. Life in the United States was tough, but it allowed Corazon to send money back home to help her family attend school, as she did on July 13, 1966. Cor takes her usual bus back to the townhouse at 2319 East 100th Street. She shared with 8 other nurses. After another long day, Corazon is looking forward to relaxing in her room and studying. The column of the following morning is shattered at 6 a.m. when a neighbor hears the panicked, frantic pleas for help coming from the student's home.
I had heard some noise outside in the morning and looked out my front bedroom window and saw Cora on the ledge. On the couch in the living room was one of my classmates.
When the police arrive shortly later, the savagery they find inside will grip the entire city of Chicago in fear and launch a manhunt to find one of America's first mass murderers. Inside the townhouse are the bodies of 8 nurses, all either stabbed, strangled, or both. However, in the middle of this disturbing scene, against all odds, one of the nurses is found alive. The police do all they can to make Corazon feel safe and comfortable. But the task is easier said than done, as the killer is still on the loose. Finding out what happened that night becomes priority number 1, and Corazon could be the key to solving the entire case, not only as a sole survivor, but the sole witness as well.
We took her mother and her cousin all the way from the far southeast side of Chicago to the very far north side resort, put her under an assumed name. We had 4 policemen to protect them, guard, befriend them.
They embraced me and they treat me like I'm their daughter.
Back at the crime scene, police worked tirelessly to put the pieces of that night in order. A ground floor window was found to have knife marks, and it's quickly determined to be the likely spot the intruder made entry. An abundance of fingerprints are also found, over 30 being from the killer. But in 1966, each print would have to be matched by hand to those of the suspect, a suspect that still eludes the police with little else to go on. The police turn to Corazon to help make sense of what happened on that night. 10:30 p.m., Corazon hears a knock on her bedroom door.
I got up from the bed and I opened the door without asking who he is, because I thought it was one of the nurses from the other room that they just want me to wake them up in the morning or something.
She opens a door, however. The first thing she sees is an intruder holding a gun. It doesn't take long for the intruder to round up the 6 nurses at home and gather them in an upstairs bedroom.
It seems like the way he talked to us, it seems like he's not gonna do anything. When we were there in that big bedroom, he just said, I just want some money, I'm going to New Orleans.
After collecting the money, only $23, the intruder gathers up some of the bed sheets and cuts them into strips using a hunting knife, one by one.
While we were sitting there, he got up, he was also sitting in there in front of us. He got up and got a bed sheet on top of the bunk bed and he stripped it into pieces. And that's the first time I saw that knife.
He ties the hands and feet of all 6 women.
I said, how come we did not even fight him, when he was doing it? Because every time someone moves, the gun will point on you.
It isn't long before noise is heard downstairs. The man demands silence, but they can all hear someone else entering the house and turning to make their way up the stairs. For a moment, that must have felt like a chance for someone to intervene, to send for help. But those dreams are dashed as the door opens and the intruder takes control of a 7th nurse. He takes time to bind her and add her with the others. It's clear now to some that this is more than a robbery, and the nurse's worst fears are confirmed when two more housemates arrive back at the townhouse. And instead of restraining them like the others, the intruder forces them both into another room.
We started with 6 of us, and then Gloria came in, and then the other 2 came in later on.
7 nurses lay on the ground, unable to move and unsure of what is happening to their friends across the hall. They do all they can to stay calm and quiet, hoping not to draw the attention of their captor. But when he makes his way back into the room, he takes another girl and leads her away.
Were you thinking that he's going to kill you?
No, I wasn't thinking of that.
6 remain still tied, and with few options, they listen. It's painfully quiet, though. Not a sound until the wash basin is heard outside the door.
And then after he took some of the girls out, and he came back, he washed his hands. I heard the water running from the faucet.
Whatever is happening out there, the man takes his time to clean up before returning. And when he does, he takes yet another nurse.
But I still did not thought that he was killing them.
5 are left, and again the pattern continues near silence, agonizing waiting. And finally the running of the tap before the door opens again, and another nurse is taken. 4 women wait in the darkness, some attempt to hide under the beds. But it isn't long before the intruder once again returns and claims another for himself.
All of us tried to crawl under the bed. I hide on one of the bed, and some of the other girls also hide under the bed.
But he found them.
Yeah.
3 nurses are hidden. This time when the man returns, he has to drag his next victim from under a bed only to our left. And when the man returns, he leaves just the last woman alone. Finally, once more the door swings open and the man steps inside. He takes the time to rummage through the purse, is looking for more money, but he finds nothing. And without searching for the 9th and final nurse, the intruder leaves.
But while I was hiding under the bed, I thought he saw me.
Hours pass, and for Corazon Amurao, each ticking minute is just a step closer to whatever fate waits for her outside that door.
I was just lying there under the bed, and I was trying to untie myself.
She struggles to loosen the binds quietly, not wanting to make a sound. 5:30 a.m., the first alarm in the house goes off, and then when the alarm goes off...
And then when the alarm goes off, I still under there, but I was not doing anything.
Because you didn't know if he was still in the house?
I didn't know whether he was still there or what.
What she worries, she may not be alone in the house, that she might be walking into a trap. A silent half an hour passes, and Corazon makes her decision to escape. Corazon crawls out from under the bed, crosses the room silently, and opens the door. What she sees confirms her worst fears.
I said that everybody's dead.
Everybody's dead.
Yeah.
She's the only one alive, unwilling to risk what she might find downstairs. She runs across the hall to her room and forces a window out of the frame. She climbs through onto a ledge overlooking East 100th Street, and as Chicago starts, it's de Corazon screams for the whole city to hear. Gloria Devi, Patricia Matusek, Nina Joe, Shmael Pamela, Wilkening Suzanne, Ferris Mary, and Jordan Murley, to guard Hello, and Valentina Passion were all murdered that night.
Can't believe that they were dead and I'm still alive. And God have some, I think he spared me.
And for Corazon, it becomes her mission to make sure the man who did this is brought to justice. And what Corazon saw that night provides the Chicago police with just the break they needed to catch a killer. First, she was able to provide them with a detailed physical description of the intruder and his sketches made up and handed out to the city's entire police force. And second, Corazon is able to reveal the killer had a unique tattoo on his left arm reading "Born to Raise Hell." And with this information, the hunt for one of America's first mass murderers is just about to have its first major break. Police start the search across the street from the scene at the National Maritime Union Hiring Hall. Incredibly, they find a photo of a member with a striking resemblance to the sketch. The photo is brought back to Corazon in protective custody. No one is expecting what they hear next. Corazon confirms the photo is of the same man she saw that night. After only one day, the Chicago police have a suspect, Richard Speck, 24-year-old. Richard Speck fled to Chicago in April of 1966. For years, he has been on the run and has a criminal history, including 41 arrests. In Dallas, Texas, in fact, it's this criminal history and Corazon's identification that allows Chicago police to match a few of the fingerprints found at 2319 East 100 to the fingerprints in Speck's Dallas file, with a potential threat to the public and the mounting evidence. The Chicago Police Superintendent O.W. Wilson makes the bold decision to publicly announce Richard Speck as the sole suspect.
The superintendent, is it up to a court of law to determine if Speck is the killer? Yes. You've already identified him as the killer? I think he is. He is.
But the only way to know for sure is to find Richard Speck. For days, police comb the city following every clue but find nothing. It's not until 3 days after the killings that Yulee presents itself a man is recovering after trying to take his own life with a glass from a broken bottle in a Skid Row hotel room.
Smashing of bottles. That's all I heard, and he didn't utter one word.
When he opened the door, oh, he was a mess. He was blood from one end to the other.
After he was rushed to the emergency room, the attending doctor made a discovery.
This guy just appeared to be the fellow, that I thought they were looking for because he had all these tattoos on him. Did you check the tattoos? So I took just some regular saliva and I just washed the blood off his arm, and a bee started coming out. And I got a little faster and it said born, so I went a little bit further and it said born to raise hell.
The patient is quickly sent from Cook County to the prison hospital after word gets out that the man all of Chicago has been hunting for could finally be in custody. All that is needed is a positive identification. Running his fingerprints will take time, so the police ask Corazon to do something unimaginable. They need her to make a positive identification in person. Against all odds, Corazon agrees, and she is brought to the hospital with a protection detail. She's dressed in a nurse's uniform and brought to the suspect's room, not wanting to tip him off. The police detail must stay behind, and Corazon is forced to confront the man that may have killed 8 of her friends all on her own. And after looking into the eyes of the man in the hospital bed, she knows it's the same man having the confirmation. They needed Chicago police arrest Richard Speck April 3rd, 1967. The trial begins in Peoria, Illinois. The case hinges on 2 vital pieces of evidence. Number 1, the fingerprints.
The crowning jewel of the physical evidence was 3 fingerprints.
It's hard to explain how they could have ended up in the house and especially on the 2nd floor. But still, they are not proof he killed the women. Second, however, is Corazon's testimony. An eyewitness to crimes.
The crowning human jewel was Corazon Amurao, who was simply the best witness I have ever seen before or since.
When Corazon is finally able to take the stand, she does something that shocks the court.
You see in the courtroom today that man who came to your door on the night of July 13th. Corazon quietly stood up, walked directly over to the defense table, and within inches of his forehead, pointed and said in an unshakably clear voice, "This is the man." She gave the most striking courtroom identification that would lie among the annals of American jurisprudence.
April 15, 1967, the trial of Richard Speck wraps up, and after less than an hour, the jury returns a verdict guilty on all charges. Richard Speck is sentenced to death.
Exactly 9 months and 2 days ago, 8 student nurses were stabbed, beaten, and strangled to death in a Chicago townhouse. Today, here in Peoria, 25-year-old Richard Speck was convicted of murdering the 8 girls. And the jury chose to sentence Speck to death.
But on December 5, 1991, Richard Speck died of a heart attack at the Stateville Correctional Center. It was 1 day before his 50th birthday for Corazon Amurao. That day meant freedom. And with the help of her family, she was able to put the trauma of her past behind her. In 1969, Corazon married her husband, Bert Eddie Enza, and they have spent the last 54 years together building a loving family. Her 2 children have grown up knowing a mother who would do anything for them. Corazon went back to nursing, helping people heal as she went through her own journey of healing. Her son grew up to be a successful accountant, and her daughter followed in her footsteps and joined a fulfilling career in healthcare. Corazon is now retired and spends as much time as she can with her grandkids at the family home in Virginia. She remembers every day that life is a precious gift and to live life to the fullest. I want to be happy all the time. Life is too short. Every time I wake up in the morning, I thank God that I am still alive.